hey, you poetic warriors of the future, who are scattered now all around, and you search for the fulfillment of your deepest drives and intuitions and emotions and visions of a full life, full plate, full power, and yet beautiful, creative, and enjoying every moment of your perception, emotion, cognition, discussion, creation, working and running and jumping and creating, and your will to power emancipateth. It is the will to power which emancipates, as our great teacher Zarathustra, or Nietzsche through the voice of Zarathustra tells us. The will emancipates, the creation. Are you the creator, or are you just an imitator? Are you a creator? And poorly would you repay your master if you would just admire him and repeat his texts and teachings. That's why you have to leave Zarathustra and find your own interpretation, your practical application of what you admire. For that, you have to travel extensively and try to fulfill your desires and emotions and visions and dreams. Never give up your deepest dreams, deepest and highest at the same time. Because the deepest dreams reach down to the core of the earth, and the core of the earth is made of gold. So, as the will to power emancipateth, and then in creation of your own works of art, creation of your own body, creation of your own place to live, be it a cottage in the forest or a farm or a temple at the shore of the sea. Well, you have to understand what is the will to power. Because you are a poetic warrior, so there are two words. You are a warrior and you are also a poet. And isn't it, well, let us keep to the definition, poetic, or the description, poetic warrior or a warrior poet. Both are possible. So the second name is, let us say, the basic, the ground, the deepest ground, and the first word is a kind of modification of it. There are poets who are not warriors. What is their problem? They lie too much because they never fulfill their vision. They never create. Back to work. The fire dog. We had a fire dog shouting and beeping in our student community here, where I live as an old poet warrior and warrior poet. There were fire alarms installed, and typical symbol and analogy of this, terrorism, acoustic terrorism of a technology that does not comply with the phenomenal actuality. It is a fire alarm which, reacts independently, suddenly, and starts to beep, 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 beep. And so many people live on that, out of that, because these old buildings have to be all equipped with fire alarms. Okay, there are some offices and ministries or whatever, they make the laws, then there is the production of these alarms, and then there's the installment. All these groups of people, installers, providers, and organizers, they live out of that. And what is the result? That phenomenologically, the people who live in these houses, especially here in this case, it were two philosophers who came, angry out of their studies, like in a temple we live here, and study and read, and I lecture, and then they're beep, 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 beep. Typical, an algorithmically driven sound, which is inhuman, which is unnatural, which is penetrating, which is disgusting and sharp, machine-like, in a tact. It is not a rhythm of nature. Nature sounds are rhythmical. The machine sounds are, tact, measured by a tact of an artificially divided continuum of time into exact units. And this is absolutely contrary to the fluidity of creative thinking and inspiration. So we met and we disassembled this machine, and I said, put it into a box, inform the producer, we are not going to tolerate this. And this is a symbol for me that we are not going to tolerate technology, politics, culture, and social relationships that destroys our warrior poetic lifestyle. This fire dog, this is a part of Zarathustra. Fire dog is a symbol of those who are performing loud speeches, ideologically empty speeches, and are trying to support the importance of it by voice power, shouting, background music, and even the media, this media, YouTube, is full of that. Disgusting, this explosion of artificial intelligence voices. Do you hear it? These artificial intelligence voices are inhuman. They are ugly. They are empty, because the artificial intelligence is not actually intelligence at all. It is a mimicry. It is an imitation. And there is no soul behind the sounds, behind the speech. There's no soul, and who is sensitive to human voices and can discern. You are the discerners, the discerning ones, according to Zarathustra, who can discern the inspiration behind the voice and the image that the speaker sees and the emotion that he lives through, will immediately be disgusted with this constant standard tone and variation of the tone, because they are not stupid. The inventors, the human producers of those AI voices, now they know that there must be some modulation, and there must be raising of the voice and falling of the voice, but that they make it again as an algorithmic program that repeats itself constantly and disregards the momentary subject, the momentary importance of what is being said. So the raising of the voice and the falling of the voice and the pauses between the sentences, it's programmed, and so it is immediately recognized as a, machine-like emptiness, because it does not follow the waves of inspiration in the speaker. And then another disaster. Artificial intelligence is capable of imitating art, visual art. They are producing pictures in illustrations for the speeches. So probably you give the words into the artificial intelligence program. You have what the subject is, who are the people, and concerned, and what is the time, and so on, of the speech, and the machine combines and combines. This is her ability. We mustn't say her, its ability to combine data with billions of other data and to throw them together, and you get images, no? And they are even so disgusting, even if they want to fake old times lecture of Nietzsche, like 1880 or something like that, 1875 or whatever, text of Nietzsche. They put some scratches on the video as if it was an old film, you see. It's terrible. And actually the surface of all those images of the artificial intelligence is too perfect, too, smooth. It should be, they get a master program, then people should like this. So they make it more appealing. So even Nietzsche would look like like a nice guy with smooth skin and even though baby face sometimes. Terrible. So, and syntactically, if you have if the artificial intelligence does not read an original text, when it has to invent a text, then you immediately recognize the emptiness of it, because it again has no soul, no idea, no motivation behind it, human motivation, not a human feeling of importance, not the ability of the human soul to associate meaningful, similar items, words, sentences, books, vision, pictures. So it simply goes on like a machine by connecting algorithmically that which is connected in the vocabulary, in the syntax, and in the semantic fields, just generally. And the result of if a sensitive listener listens to this, is just like feeling there is no core, there is no message. It's just circling around, repeating all the time the same message in various variations. Disgusting, like you would like to love somebody and you would be talking all the time about it and never touch the hand. So that was an digression, my criticism of the artificial intelligence. But you are warriors and poets at the same time, and sometimes you are more poets, sometimes you are more warriors. But you are not only poets and you are not only warriors, because these are one-sided characters. And this is very well an introduction to the great question mark which hangs over the work of Nietzsche. And this is his conception of the will to power, which you have to understand if you want to be poetic warriors. and if you want to, sometimes allowed to be warrior poets. So we can simply divide it by taking an ideal figure, somebody who is only a poet and not a warrior, and somebody who is only a warrior and not a poet. They both will exemplify the two conceptions of the will to power, which Nietzsche has spread through all his works, and sometimes he was well aware of the logical contradiction that it is in both those conceptions of the will to power, but we have to ascribe it to his honesty that he did not, unify this theory into one and had two theories of the will to power, because he was honest to himself in an extreme degree. I think Nietzsche was one of those who has such a deep knowledge of his own variations, of his own experiences, and of his own evaluating. And he, above all, lived alone, so there was no escape from him. He could not cheat himself. He could not become a real teacher in some school or master of, a certain clan, a ruler, a king, who could hide behind, the government or the board of directors. He could not hide behind an ideology that would be carried by others who would agree or disagree, okay? So he was alone. So there was no other way than to be in agreement with himself. He didn't want to be frustrated all the time. So he went on and on, spreading these two conceptions of the will to power through all of his work and saying, like, why do we have these mornings full of power, and why do you have your evenings when you are exhausted and you want to relax? So don't be angry if you behave in a different way, if you feel in a different way, if you value in a different way in the morning and in the evening. And in the morning we would put the warrior value system, okay? And in the evening we would put the poetic, just metaphorically, value system. And if you look at one person who is only a poet, what does he do? He simply invents, let us say, beautiful landscapes, beautiful sceneries. He writes love poems to women he will maybe never meet. He calls it his muse, okay? He invents some, other worlds. In this, he's similar to the priest. And here we come to the point of contradiction. Nietzsche has called the priest as a kind of archetype of the strongest will to power. And yet, at the same time, he described him as decadent. So, what is the problem? Where is the truth? Where is the actuality? Is the priest really the representative of the strongest, deepest will to power? Then you have to be a warrior, very strong, healthy, life-supporting, enjoying, and not running away into some other worlds. But this is not the case. So we take the poet and his strengthened variation, the priest, and the today's variation of it are politicians, sometimes scientists, all those who invent theories, other worlds, okay. We call this conception of power cognitive will to power, okay. Cognitive will to, the ability to re-evaluate sensory perception, to re-evaluate emotional experiences, to re-evaluate the economic reality, maybe, political reality, into an ideal state, disregarding the facts and the phenomena, even not only the facts but also the phenomenal experience, and changing it into some ideal realm. This is will to power of a priest, of a poet, of a politician, okay, even of a sick patient who is about to die, but he, and in this case it is justified, dreams himself into some other world. That's why Nietzsche says also the poets, what about the poets? They lie too much. And even Zarathustra is a poet. Maybe he has deceived you as he speaks to his disciples now, who admire him, and he is not satisfied with all this admiration, because he wants to have friends who can co-create. It was Nietzsche's great desire not to be completely alone. And so he says to his disciples, well, you have not yet found yourself, and then you found Zarathustra. But of what account is your belief? Of what account is Zarathustra? Maybe he has deceived you. And so I will leave you now, and I will return only if you have all refused me. Okay. Then I will look at you with different eyes. What does it mean? This is another installment of this triad: camel, lion, and the child. The last man, the decadent man of today, can be changed into a Superman only through a series of transformation. Nietzsche informs us on very many places in his work. First, he has to understand the situation in which he is and the mankind has, maneuvered itself through the millennia. He has to study, and to study deeply, and to study especially the works of Nietzsche as if you have written them in your own blood. That is what Nietzsche asks from you. And what does it mean? Well, you have to live through all those experiences he describes. And it has to take many years, like 20, 30 years. So first, you have to read all, and you have to read it so closely and alone, without any expectation that you will be rewarded for that. Definitely a semester at the University of Nietzsche is nothing. A youth, as Nietzsche says, of 35 or 30 years, of 40 maybe even, is just a beginner. So you have to study the traditions and also other philosophers whom Nietzsche refutes. No? Yet this, you become a camel. You go to the university, you let yourself be, what is the English word? Laid with books. You're full of books, and you go into the tradition row, and you make your examinations, and you study, and yet you keep your what? The other part of your soul is still alive, the poet in you. If you are a diligent student, then nevertheless you have to live fully as a poet. So you write poems to the girls you love, and you don't care if they, reply on the same level, or if they are at all interested in you. You exert your poetic power. You run for expeditions in beautiful nature. No? You go skiing and sailing, and you play tennis. You go for expedition into the wild, great nature, and you don't care if you have to go alone. If you have friends, so much the better. But the landscape, the mountains, the rocks, the happy isles, the oceans, the volcanoes, the forests, they all are drawing you. And here we come to the second conception of will to power. This is the poetic, well, the same, but it's from another perspective. The poetic, the cognitive will to power of a priest, of a poet who is, compensating, of a politician who is lying to his people by inventing beautiful futures that are not based on facts, okay, and a producing agency which is flooding the market with some bullshit nonsense and is cheating in the media about the product. They all use cognitive will to power, okay, ability to lie too much, okay, and it's why Nietzsche says poets that belong to this category, they lie too much also. But we talk now about another poet. That is the poet who is the other side of this diligent Kama student who really feels there is depth in Nietzsche, and he studies it slowly, reading, making notes, okay, and not being proud to see I have understood it completely. Now I am 25, now I'm 30. Now I'm going to make speeches on the YouTube about Nietzsche with a heightened and tenuous voice, like an evangelic priest. I have found my Zarathustra. I have found my new God. I have found a new meaning for my life. Now I will tell you how you all are wrong. And maybe he also has big muscles and he's exercising fitness in the studio and he's persuaded that the huge muscles make an argument because he has misunderstood the concept of Zarathustra and of the overman. Overman or the Übermensch or the Superman is definitely not somebody who is exerting his physical power without the creative poetic power, and that's a mistake. So now if you are the other type of an honest camel that studies and feels the calling of wisdom and yet has like a veneration for language and for formulation and feels a kind of deep wisdoms in those texts that he cannot achieve himself, and he is honest enough not to imitate and not to change the meaning so that it suits his personal egoistic will to power, his cognitive will to power. If you are a man like that, you are a real camel, then you can also be a real poet, because you let your soul be drawn to the beauty, to the actual beauty of, let us say, nature, or of your muse, of your female student colleague that inspires you, as I did very many times in the high school and the university. I was always almost in love, but I did not expect immediate results. I was writing them poems, I was talking to them nicely, and I felt very good. Finally, I have succeeded, and I was in love deeply, and sometimes also tragically then, with those girls in the young days, because they were naturally different from my world. But they could participate in it, and I could participate in their lives for quite a long time. So this would be a different poet, you see? A poet who is passively drawn to the beauty, who kind of opens his soul field and wanders through the forest in silent amazement, and who watches this girl, the muse, and he cannot but write poems to her. This is your good treasure. You should keep it, né? Because then, when you have transgressed, or when you have, fulfilled the chapter of being a camel, then you will roar. You will become a lion, because you have really absorbed all the wisdom of Nietzsche from books or from other philosophers. No? And then if it is really digested, then it ferments and it breaks out and it calls to you. Now, you cannot read this forever. You cannot talk about it at the university. You cannot become a professor of philosophy and just, repeat and repeat and repeat, and you are a historian. You are not a true philosopher, as Nietzsche correctly discerns. The true philosopher is not the one who repeats the history of philosophy. The true philosopher is the one who sets new values. This is it. And he sets them first for himself, and he lives according to them, regardless of what the current system of value dictates. And if he succumbs on this style of life, due to this style of life, then so be it. He is the overcomer. He is the one who falls down and is destroyed, but in the moment of this, he also experiences the overcoming. He is the bridge to the future Superman, okay? He made a few steps that are the only true steps the humankind can go to survive, not to become a debilitated crowd of, consumers living in an artificial world of illusions. So you shout, you roar, you throw the books down, you run away from the caravan of the camels, and you run into the mountains like Zarathustra did several times, repeatedly. He was already behind the stage of lion. He wanted to become a teacher, but he understood, I can go down to the valleys, to the city, to the town called the Pied Cow, and I can talk to those last men only for a short time, because they misunderstand me. And I want to go on in my purity, and then I have to return to the mountains. And when I shall found disciples, I can go with them for a short while, but then I have to send them away, because I don't want to be surrounded by admirers only. This differentiates him from the false warrior. The false warrior is more of a priest, a kind of ideological, loud, shouting fire dog who is to be heard in the media. So you look at the media and you see all those who are popular with millions of clicks, and they have a kind of tenuous voice, and they spread the new teaching like priests, and they are hoarse sometimes, and they are, as I feel it, kind of, there's too much will to power of this cognitive quality. They have a strong pressure in the nerves, in the brain, and also in the soul field, that it should be like they say. They are actually dictators. They want to be absolute commanders in their own artificial world, but they hide it shrewdly behind pretending to be, politically correct now. In the similar way, like the artificial intelligence, they can be discerned that they are not true. So Nietzsche and Zarathustra can be alone, and you as a lion, in your stage of a lion, you can be alone, because you are filled with the true wisdom, true knowledge, and now you see it evolve in practical terms. Where can it be today? So maybe you become a farmer. Maybe you run away to the mountains and build yourself, if you have the means to it and the ability, to build yourself a cottage and a small garden, and you live there, for several years alone or with a friend. Or you become a sportsman and you silently build up your abilities, and you really win in tournaments, because you are also a poet enough not to be blinded by simply the force of the body and the mechanical measurement and the mathematical calculations and the money that comes with your career. So now, so we have had here two aspects of the poet. One poet who is a false creator, who is an imitator, who is full of the cognitive will to power, who wants to live in illusions and imitations, and wants to persuade the others to believe in him. So he needs admirers. He can believe in himself only if the others believe in him. And they are popular. They are on the market. It is a loud market in the media. Then we have the poet who is a true poet, who can be alone, who is creating for the beauty of creation, who does not need recognition from the others, because his reward is the act of creation. Creation emancipated. Okay? Are you creators or are you imitators? Are you actors or are you, true ones? The will to power emancipated. And then we come to the second will to power. What is the second conception of the will to power in Nietzsche, and how does it spread into the poet's life, his soul, his body, and into the warrior's life and body and soul? The second conception of the will to power in Nietzsche is a cellular, a biological, a metabolical process. Okay, it is the body which stands behind your spirit, that is behind your cognition, behind your ego, okay, behind your cognitive will to power stands the biological will to power, that is the body. Or sometimes called the self in Nietzsche, but then he immediately said it is the body, so that you don't make a mistake like Jung and the others who then discern the ego and the self, and yet keep the self in the realm of cognition, of, let us say, kind of software realm. No. He immediately says, behind your small spirit, stands the great spirit. It is the self, it is the body. And the body does not think, does not combine, does not, argument. The body does, the body acts, the body is a necessity of millions of cellular processes, metabolism, inherited from your tribe, supported by the landscape in which you live. There are traces of thousands of years of your tribe and of the changes in the landscape in which your tribe and finally your parents were living. So this is a biological power, and it does not argument, it does not persuade, it does not use dialectics. It is simply expressing itself powerfully or weakly. And this is what Nietzsche called then decadence, if the expression of the cellular biological will to power is weak and decaying, dying, then it's decadence. And logically, the decadent biological will to power compensates itself immediately with the cognitive will to power, because it does not accept the fact that it is dying as a body. So it creates an illusion of an overbody, and that is some esoteric body, or some body made of light, and some afterworld body. And in the modern terms, it is the robotic body, and it is the transhumanist monster that should live forever. The transhumanism and artificial intelligence are expressions of the decadence of the 21st century. It's absolutely clear. So now what do we do if we want to be poet and warriors? Let us go on. We have a kind of synchronic view of it. If you look at it like philosophers who deal with ideas and describe them, then we can talk about the poet and warrior and decadence and the cognitive will to power and biological will to power. But then we have a diachronic perspective that is, evolution of one individual, even though we take him as an ideal individual, but it is conception of how these two aspects of the will to power play together in the development of one individual, human individual, which is important for you because you are one individual. You are not a kind of schema, you are not a kind of archetype. And if you succumb to the power of an archetype, then you lose yourself. No? That is why Nietzsche sends his disciples away from him, even though if they seem to understand everything perfectly, what he says, and even though they admire him, he says, this is not enough. You are archetypes. Of what account is it that you have found Nietzsche, Zarathustra? Okay, you did not yet found yourself. So go down into the valleys, go down into the cities, travel on the ships, work on the farms, study in the universities once again, or become medical doctors or whatever, professional sportsmen. Go through your life alone and try to apply what you have learned here. And then you become true, friends of Zarathustra. And surely, truly, I will look upon you with different eyes when I see you again. Because a good discerner sees immediately in the posture, in the motion, in the tone of the voice, feels the quality of the soul behind. And so Zarathustra, who has known his disciples as when they were young and admires, he will recognize if they have become, superficial, apes of Zarathustra, or if they are the true ones. Like a Zen master recognizes very sharply and instinctively if a disciple in the Zen monastery has really achieved Satori. Because this is such a powerful moment that it reverberates, it stays in the soul and in the body of the enlightened one, so that he even does not care if the master approves of him, because he has become master himself, and this immediately shows itself in his posture, in his motion, and the real master does not have to ask him, and describe me your enlightenment. It would be like bargaining, like trying. Maybe the true master was not the true master at all. He was imitating something, and now he wants to learn something from the students about the true enlightenment. So now, those two who have achieved real Satori, they know instinctively of the others that there is no need for admiration. They simply bow and go their own way. Maybe if the master of the monastery is old enough and he wants to recede into his private forest temple to dissolve into the Brahman as they believe, they simply gives the monastery under the leadership of the new enlightened disciple, because he is full of energy and he is true. Okay, so let us say, now back to the diachronic view. So we have seen you as a student, as a camel, diligently studying and reading for many years Nietzsche's works and other philosophers, and who is, trying to live everything what he reads with his blood, to write it once again with his blood. This is to really live it. Okay, then he has enough of that. He accumulated the true wisdom, and he says, now I cannot cook this meal forever. Like you were in the kitchen, you would cook your meal like for 5 hours, man. And another guy would come, are you crazy, man? Why don't you eat it? You have cooked it already 1 hour ago. Ah, yes, sorry. I forgot. I was so concentrated on cooking that I forgot to eat now. So the eating is running away from the university, or from an ashram, or from some study group now you were in, and trying to do it on your own. This is the only way. To know your strengths, to enlarge your strength, to deepen your strength, to deepen your theoretical knowledge. What does the poet do? Whereas the poet in your young days was writing the poems for beautiful girls and about beautiful nature, and was experiencing the tension in beautiful surroundings, while his soul was free. And as we know that the soul is a morphogenetic field that can expand, and by itself, innately, it has the tendency to merge with similar soul fields. That is the ontological background, or the depth of your emotion when you feel you are being drawn to something, to some landscape, to a person, to a music. Okay, This is truly because your soul field has merged with that which is pulling you to, merge with your soul field, and the expression of it is the tension and desire in your soul. So you have been doing this, writing, staying a true poet and a true student, true Kemal. Now you are a warrior. You concentrate more on doing. The body speaks in you. The body does not argument. The body does not persuade. The body does not use dialectics. As Nietzsche says it in other works, like I think it was about the early Hellenes, when they were still very strong in their bodies, warriors truly, disregarding death, the argumenting and the talking and the dialectical persuasion was looked upon as an expression of not decadence. They didn't have a word of this kind, but it was unfavorably looked at as weakness. A man who is a lion, who is a true warrior, does not need arguments for his action. He simply does it. And then we can talk about it. What is the value of it? If you disagree with me from the beginning before the action is done, then we'll fight for it. It was good at those times because there were no guns, and no poisons and no, sophisticated weapons, because sophisticated weapons are the domain of the weaklings, because they are afraid of standing man against man, so they hide behind technology. It is unfortunate with the human race on this planet, that decadence has taken the shape of technology, and especially the killing technology. That's why man-to-man combat is no more possible. It's no more meaningful. I was laughing kind of in an absurd way when I have heard those, maybe even Zarathustra admirers from Western Europe fitness studios who have some tattoos and who sit in front of the mirrors and they lift heavy weights and they read Nietzsche and they become, obsessed by the war, by like Vikings. They dress like Vikings, and then they have artificial swords and they fight a hammer with some hammers, in competitions, and then they get this idea, okay, let's go into a true war. Let's go to Russia. I have one Russian killed or something like that. That would be a thrilling experience, because what? They have lost a poet inside their soul. They have become only warriors under the command of yet the cognitive will to power. Their very strong cellular power of the body was carried away by the cognitive will to power, by the grandeur, by the superego image that I will kill everybody, who does not agree with me. They don't have an idea behind the true idea behind the killing. They just want the act of the killing, of fighting to death, is a kind of archetypal image that draws them. And Nietzsche would go so far that he would express it as a morally acceptable excuse for suicide. Because in their innermost self, they feel that this pressure is not to be held for a long time. It will explode. And either they will become criminals in their own societies, or they will have to run away to loneliness, or they will have to die honorably in a war. And that's why they go to the war. Okay, this is a decadent. This is a kind of cellular will to power that is not in harmony. There are instincts inside such bodies, drives that are conflicting, and they are not to be united. And that's why Nietzsche also says in Zarathustra, many men like this have gone into the desert and have killed themselves because they didn't want to be battlefields of conflicting instincts. This array, the degeneration of the instinct, is a terrible inner experience, because you can never rely on yourself. You contradict yourself constantly. And the cause of it is what? Nietzsche says it's the mixing of races. You do not stay in one tradition. If you stay in one tradition of one race, of one tribe, slowly the degenerate ones will be, put aside, and the beautifying and the deepening of the characters is possible if you have one river which can clean itself. But if you mix various rivers, you will be always, overpowered by that what is entering into your blood from side streams that, you don't know where they come from. They again have a long 1,000-year of tradition, and this will make havoc in your soul and body. So let's back to the darkening perspective. We have seen that. I must finish this digression. So these kind of degenerate will to power, the biological will to power, that is degenerated because of the contradiction of its own drives in the body, and is not compensated by the true poetic will to power, by the inspiration which would even cause, like a warrior of this type who has a strong poetic will to power, will simply ride to the battle, and suddenly there would be such beautiful clouds and such smell of moisture and of flowers in the wind that he would feel like, I'm crazy. Why do I run into this battle when I can lie down on this meadow and go on through this enchanted forest, and maybe I will find a small cottage with a fairy inside. Well, this would be an expression of a soul that is open, soul field is open, and the forest is really merging with the soul of the forest is merging with it. That's why I hate so much in these modern wars that nature is destroyed on a massive scale with explosions, and nobody cares. That is the body of the mother planet Earth, and that the forests that are burned and the rivers that are poisoned could, prevent the warriors of this type from killing each other by simply, saying, look at this beautiful lake. We stop this nonsense killing, and we make a party here and go swimming and make fires and make songs. Oh, the generals would be surprised if they would see on a satellite a picture like that. The enemies dancing and making barbecue and swimming in a beautiful lake and laying the guns aside, because they would be really poet warriors. Okay, but if you have no poet in you, then you really have no other choice than to go and hope that you will die in an honest fight, and like that you will excuse your you're empty and you're frustrating every day. And Nietzsche says also this is correct. We have to honor warriors like this who feel there's no other way for me than to die in honest battle. I cannot live anymore in the normal society. So, if your life is of no value, see to it that at least your death is a masterpiece, okay, of quality. This was also a message of Zarathustra. But if you have your true poet in yourself, whom you have nurtured even in your camel years when you were a student, then it will stop you, it will prevent you from exploding in the pure, battle madness, okay? That's why I was laughing absurdly about the absurdity that these young guys of this decadent type who wanted to go to the Ukraine from Germany or England or somewhere from Poland, some Bosnia or whatever, and they wanted to really fight and see the blood, and they came home totally shocked that they needed psychiatric and psychological treatment because they said, we have not seen anybody. There was only constant bombardment. We have to stay in the bunkers all the time, and the bombs were raining on us all the time. And there was only one break time when we could go outside. It was between 12 and 1 p.m. when the Russians were eating. They make the cannoneers, they made a lunch break, and so we could go out. But there were no Russians. They were like, 5, 10, 15 kilometers away, and they were just simply pouring bombs on us. This is no war. I wanted to engage in a single combat. I was learning this, and I would love, even if I die, I would, enjoy it. But this is frustrating. This is no honest war. So this is the outcome of modern technology, where as I've said, the weaklings are smart. The envious one are smart because they have the time. They are not living in ecstasy of power and beauty and creation. They cower in the libraries, in the laboratories, and they study and study. What do they study? How to understand the body of the Mother Earth so that they can control it. And this is an unexpressed desire of destroying those who are really truly living. We have a great problem here. Modern technology is truly a monster that can kill all the poets and all the true warriors. So we have to have a greatest admiration to those warrior poets among us who still can understand modern technology. Because we didn't stop it on time, now it has overtaken, and now it can destroy all life on the planet Earth. So let us go back to our one archetypal guy who is now become a true warrior, and he is a true poet. Both conceptions of the will to power are united in him. The poetic, in its positive sense, we have seen that the poetic, the cognitive will to power, has also a negative sense. This is the one which is compensating and inventing artificial worlds and running away from the unsatisfied unsatisfying reality of a weak body, but a strong body, and united with the poetic cognitive will to power, can create beyond itself, above itself. It is creating out of the love for life. That's why even in marriage or in conception of children, in his aphorism about marriage and the child, Zarathustra says, you should procreate not only, sideways, but above yourself. The meaning of your marriage, of your conception of a child, should be to create a Superman. Well, very difficult today, isn't it? If you would contact your girlfriend whom you love and say, let us create a Superman, she would call the police or a psychiatric ambulance. So that's why there have to be different ways. There have to be temples, farms, schools of warriors where they can live according to their ideals among themselves, and then they can organize like festivals and stuff like that where girls will be drawn in who admire such a way of life. And the true poetic warrior must not be kind of, a slave of his small sexual ego. As well as Zarathustra says, I have seen so many who, couples who were joined by the sexual perversion or sexual hunger or even economic problems, marriage for money. And this all has to be, forgotten. Does not exist for the true warrior. The true poetic warrior has his friends who, support his way of life, who are honest, who do not admire him if he is false warrior, who tell him directly what they feel, and they support him when he shows true greatness, and if he gets hurt and frustrated and exhausted, they help him in the Nietzschean way, that is, be a hard bat for your friend, help him, but don't pity him. Pitying a warrior is an affront, a kind of, a real warrior does not want to be pitied. He appreciates help, he recovers, and then he goes on his warrior way. So what comes next? You are a true warrior. You are a true poet. When the positive sense, you do not create as a compensation. You are not a weakling who uses his cognitive ability to think and combine to create, artificial words or weapons of destruction that can overcome the true warrior. So we have said there is a great problem of today, because Nietzsche was writing 1860, 70, 1880, 80s. The First World War was still like 20 years ahead, and the Second World War much more, and today, and the technology in between has made such an advance. It is sometimes so depressing, because on one side, the masses, the herd, the last man, will be completely devoured and penetrated and martyred and disintegrated by the modern technology. they cannot withstand, because it is so pleasant and makes life so easy, and they want to, have sensual pleasures and cognitive pleasures, and above all, they do not want to be hurt, they do not want to feel physical pain. So these machines and these consumers and lifestyle and these drugs and illusions, the mass media swamp, it will devour them. Okay. And the evil ones, the weaklings, the pretenders, the false warriors, the false poets, they have been clever. They have studied the technology and they can master it. No? So the main difficult task of today is to learn as poetic warrior to be the master of modern technology also, and not to lose your warrior body and not to lose your poetic soul, creative soul. So almost impossible, no? Almost impossible. how many hours a day would have to have that you would be all of this? You could learn and master all of this. So that's why a cooperation is necessary. There appears a new archetype, as I have seen in my life experiences, a sympathizing, clever software engineer maybe, or somebody who understands the modern technology, yet for some reason he has the admiration for the warrior lifestyle, even though he himself is not a warrior of the body, but he is a poet of the positive type. He has an ear for beauty, an eye for beauty, and he can admire this. And he, above all, his quality is not to be envious. His quality is to know. He has to be a good kamo. He has to study, and he has to come upon the idea that the physiological, the body-based, the cellular will to power is not given to him in full scale, and that it is stupid to envy it because it will not help him. But what he can do is become a true supporter, organizer, and he can sit at the screens if there would be some, clash of the heroic warrior poets with the decadent power of the envious and of the destroyers of man. This is probably most of the military today, and most of the high tech, and most of the artificial intelligence and a transhumanist league. No? So out of this, we have two lines converging here. The life history of one true archetype poet, warrior, and warrior poet, and the danger in which he is now due to the power of machinery, technology, which is mostly in the hand of the decadents. No? The last resort is the third transformation of the poet-warrior, of the lion in Nietzsche's triad, the transformation of the lion into a child. Because what can a child do? What the camel could not do, what even the lion could not do. A child, as a third transformation on the way from the last man to the Superman, is a self-propelling wheel. It's a qualitative jump into a different realm of creation. It is the freedom of the new beginning. It is the rosy dawn of new life, new power. And this is our hope, that qualities of, how should we describe it? Because this is where we are now. Only we are the possible children of Zarathustra. Only we are the possible children of which Nietzsche so much desired. Zarathustra has understood finally that he cannot find his children unless he creates them himself. Because all around him he would find only admirers, only the last higher man. Do you understand it? Now the last chapters of Thus Spake Zarathustra, the fourth part, where the higher man come to the cave of Zarathustra in the mountains, they are the ones who really admire him, who really understand him, and they are even the heads of the corporations. They are even the heads of states, heads of religious congregations, the popes and the kings and the philosophers, and maybe in modern language also the governmental head, the exceptional one who have seen that there is nothing to be done. The decadence is spreading, that Zarathustra is right, and they admire him. The last chapters of Thus Spake Zarathustra. But what do? They praise him, they admire him, they drink and they eat in his cave. He invites them. There's space enough. There's space enough. That is, even in those heroic schools we envision today, or the temples and kind of farms and communities, there should be a practice of, there is space for everyone, but don't expect that we shall tolerate your decadence. We shall tell you exactly what we feel, and you have the chance to work on yourself hard. And if you come to the conclusion that you cannot go on, you can leave immediately. And if you come to the conclusion you want to support the true warrior poets and the new children of Zarathustra with all what you have, without envy, okay, then you can stay. Even as Goethe would say, there where you cannot love, you should leave, you should go away. Because if admiration only is not enough, it can turn into envy. If you stay, and lots of occurrences suddenly show you that you admire only to be like them truly, to be one of them, and you cannot, then your admiration will turn to envy. You have to understand that you cannot become like the poet warrior child, because your physiology does not allow it. That is the hard argument of Nietzsche, that the body is behind everything. And this is the truly understood will to power of Nietzsche, which is unfortunately yet not clear to many of those who admire him in their YouTube contributions or other contributions. They still are defending the cognitive will to power more, because they are kin to the priests, to the ideologues. They think and feel, and must so think and feel, that their articles and that their YouTube contributions will make them great. The cognitive power of their arguments will win. They will be accepted as the true discerners. But it is not the case. It is a compensation, a priestly expression of the will to power of a weak body. We have the other ones. I have seen them. Strong guys, muscles, and even kind of handsome and full of the youth power, and they are on the wave of their biological will to power, and they want to hammer it down, but they lack the true point again. That is the problem. The right dosage of the poetic will to power is necessary, and it is the balance that is so unusual between a strong body and a poetic soul. No? Boom, 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 boom. So the masked priest who would like to be like, like the new warrior poet child, you notice I have created a new triad connection. Warrior poet child, or the poet warrior child. We must say it correctly, warrior poet child, because we will say now that from the two conceptions of the will to power, the biological is more dominant. It is the dominant one. That's why we agree with Nietzsche's first kind of argument that the body is everything. It comes from him because he was himself quite frequently ill, physically weak, and yet he had this very strange ability to recover. This is what made him great. Ability to recover from a serious disease. That's why he says in Ecce Homo, I am half decadent and half a Superman. The Superman in him enabled him to recover fully, and in the process of recovery, phenomenally to experience the blessedness of the new openness of the body and soul for the smells, for the colors, for the winds, for the stars, for the suns, for the rivers, for the trees. Oh, that's why he was so much outdoors. He was always outdoors. The big ideas, big visions came to him only when walking outdoors. He was then sitting and writing about it, but the ideas came, the visions came outdoors in a physical kind of exercise. So we say we have a new triad to describe the ideal one who is on the way to Zarathustra's child. He is a warrior with a strong body, healthy body, inherited from a long tradition of his tribe, not mixed. Maybe there may be some mixtures that were in the past that showed themselves favorably, but they must be from similar cultures. No? So, and he inherited this very strong body. Then he has the poetic soul, which is an effect of a lucky throw of coincidences in his childish and youth years, that he was born in a time when there was no hunger, there was no war, because that would immediately destroy his physiological base. Ne? Then he must be born into some culture that is, and a strata of society that allows a certain passive letting go of the worry how to survive. The parents, the mother, the father, very important. The schooling, the healthcare, the nourishment, the climate. You see, there's so many components that might play together favorably that a youth has a strong inherited body and a poetic soul in the positive sense. It creates out of the abundance of body power. He has visions opened to him by his physical ecstasy in sport, like in young days, no? By listening to music, and he has visions, and he can then describe them in his poems, and he strives to fulfill them also in his, private life, in his lonesome travel through nature, or if he falls in love, he wants to take his beloved muse out into the nature and live those visions.